Are we ready down here? You guys ready? Chris, you ready? It's 7:32, Monday Night Football. You know.
Good point, Ann.
You're good? Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the school district of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of Chatham Borough and Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the TAP. Mr. DeCola?
Ms. Ross. Ms. Allen.
Present.
Mr. Del Sandro.
Here.
Ms. Kenny.
Here.
Mr. Ryan.
Here.
Mr. Smith. Ms. Weber.
Here.
Dr. Zhang.
Here.
And Ms. Ciccarelli.
Here.
7 present and accounted for.
Perfect. If you're able, please stand to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
Liberty and justice for all. We're not in unison on that.
It's like when the priest says
That's correct. Right. Okay. I don't have any additional comments before the administrative reports, so we'll move it over to Dr. LaSousa for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Ciccarelli. The only item under my section of the agenda is just a brief presentation on enrollment, so I'll ask you to go into the seats and I'll do my thing really quickly. Thank you, Nick. So as we begin the year, I frequently give a brief update on enrollment in the newsletters that I send out right before the school year begins, but there's never enough space in those documents to get into the weeds a little bit. So I'll just do that tonight to give an overview of where we stand, especially as it pertains to the reconfiguration that we're working on that will take place in about 11 months. So to start, let me just point out a couple of things, and many of you know this, but it's worth just noting. Our enrollment is not static. It changes all the time. Throughout the course of a year, kids enter the district, kids exit the district, and so any day that you take the temperature of enrollment, the enrollment can be different. All of our enrollment data is housed in Genesis. Genesis is our student information system. We've been using it for about 15 years, and for prior years, Genesis pulls the final day of enrollment or the enrollment of the final day of the school year. For the current year, Genesis pulls the current day, so it's a real-time application. For this report, I tried to go back as far as I could, basically 20 years back, and then as far forward as I could look. So when I went beyond 2008-9, I went to the DOE, but the DOE pulls enrollment data for every district in New Jersey only on one day of the year, and that's October 15th. So I've tried to be as consistent as I can be, apples to apples, but there's always some variation just based on the source of data and when enrollment numbers are pulled. And then finally, that last bullet is just to say that this is for students attending district schools. So the state of New Jersey, for example, uses the October 15th enrollment report in part to inform how it distributes state aid. And the state of New Jersey calculates students enrolled on a half-time basis, either through VOTEC or kindergarten, as only a 0.5 of a student, whereas for my purposes, I count them as a full human being. And it's for all students attending district schools. So this slide I put into the newsletter that I sent back in August, and it was just to point out that we had a demographic report conducted in 2018. We had the demographer back in 2022 to revisit the numbers because, of course, we didn't predict there'd be a global pandemic in 2018. And we knew that there was new housing developments coming on in both municipalities. So the demographer had projected an enrollment decline, and what we've experienced at least the last couple of years is that the enrollment has not continued to decline as the demographer thought might happen. And the demographer always bases his or her estimates on birth rates. So to look a little more deeply than that one slide, this is what our enrollment pattern has looked like over the past 20 years, since 2004, 2005. We peaked at about 4,300 students in 2016, 17, thereabouts. And since then, we've been on a decline, and you can see at the end of the chart here that decline has kind of plateaued. And one thing that we keep an eye on all of the time is just the grade 1 enrollment. So what this shows is the cohort of first grade for each year listed. So going back 20 years, roughly 21 years, this was the number of students that entered first grade that year. So you can see that 375 number is about 2009-10, I think, or 2010-11. That's how many students we had in first grade in 2009 or 10. And so then it's no surprise that if you fast forward, 11 years for when those students are in 12th grade, that you're probably going to have a larger high school population, or even when they get to 9th, 10th, 11th. But when those 337, 375 numbers hit the high school is when you'll have the largest population in high school. When they hit the middle school is when you'll have the largest population in middle school. So this is what first grade has looked like every year going back about 20 years. Interestingly, though, once they get into first grade, a cohort of students, they then change over time, right? Some students will begin first grade in Chatham and then they'll leave. Some students will not begin first grade in Chatham, but they might move in from North Carolina or India or California or wherever it might be in 5th grade or 6th grade. So this table just shows the number of students who entered first grade for each graduating class going back 10 years. So if I took the class of 2020 right in the middle of the chart, 312 kids started in first grade, 312 kids graduated in 12th grade. But those aren't all the same kids. So it could be that the 312 was flat, but 25 of those students might be ones who didn't begin first grade. And the same goes for every class up there. You could have had 50 kids exit the district after they began first grade, but then another 70 come into the district at some point in time. And the reason I showed this is just to show that, number one, our cohorts change over time. And number two, that last column tells you that we really haven't had any consistent pattern with how the cohorts change. So some years we'll get a cohort in first grade, and 11 years later, when we look up when they're seniors, they've increased by a dozen kids. Other times they've decreased by 24 kids. There really isn't a rhyme or reason in terms of trying to predict what's going to happen to the class of first graders or the cohort of first graders. This is just the same data, but shown with lines instead. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. So then, taking that as a sort of a backdrop, I'm just going to show the pre-K through 5, the elementary enrollment over time, over the past 20 years, and then the middle school enrollment, and then the high school enrollment. So you can see here, this is the total number of students, those blue numbers above the line, total number of students we've had in pre-K through 5 for each of the years listed. And you can see, you know, in line with when that class of 375 began, the peak was just over 2,000 students in 2012-13 or so, if I'm reading that right. And you can see how we've fallen. And then all the way to the right of the screen, you can see that we've plateaued and we've stopped declining in the last 3 years. And then I just included here rough estimate of when the building expansions took place. So there was a referendum in the district back in 2005. That referendum was the one that led to construction at Chatham Middle School, Washington Avenue School, Lafayette, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in Milton. So the district at the time, before probably all of us in this room were here or paying attention at least, was building in preparation of the rising enrollment back in 2005. We had another building expansion you can see in 2016. That was the referendum of 2016 that redesigned or refurbished this auditorium we're standing in, added a few design and technology classrooms at the middle school, and then you can see the rest here. And the building expansion here for PK through 5 was at Milton Avenue School, 4 classrooms at Milton Ave. At the middle school, you can see the steep increase up to just shy of 1,100 students in about the 2017-18 school year or so, and then the gradual decline. And then I've included here 2 lines at the end. One's dotted, one is not dotted, but the solid line reflects what the enrollment will look like next year when we have 4 grade levels in the middle school instead of only 3. And the dotted line shows what the middle school enrollment would have looked like had we not moved the 5th grade over to the middle school. And then finally, we have the high school. And the high school, you can see, had this precipitous increase for a long period of time, and it was increasing even before that. The enrollment in the high school was below 800 when I started as a high school teacher. So it climbed very swiftly right up through and into the pandemic, basically. And then as the cohorts were smaller in those incoming 1st grade classes, eventually they made their way to the high school, and you can see that the high school enrollment has dropped pretty considerably. So we're down about 140 students off of our highs at the high school, and we're heading southward to about 1,000 students based on current 1st grade enrollment. So you can see in some of these charts the reasons why we've been looking at different, potential uses of our schools, right? The reason we've been able to start full-day kindergarten, and we did it gradually, was that the elementary enrollments had fallen down to a level where, in addition to expanding our special education program, we had space where we could use classrooms for full-day kindergarten. That's what this chart kind of shows. At the middle school, if we weren't going to move the 5th grade into the building, you could see how much excess capacity we would have, from a high of 1,100 before the most recent building expansion down to only around 750 students in the next few years. And at the high school, we have a lot of space because we have the greatest window into the future, since we have the greatest number of cohorts prior to high school in the district. So another way just to think about the high school, and again, this sort of folds into the thinking about whether or not there's space to accommodate a district like Harding Township, who is at least exploring the potential idea of sending students here. Right now, if you look at Chatham High School, who's at Chatham High School, it's these 4 cohorts of 1st graders. So when they started as 1st graders, they totaled 1,231 kids. Now they total 1,204, because 27 of them, or a net of 27 of them, have left the district since they began in 1st grade. But those cohorts are the ones that are at the high school now. If we try to look ahead, we can roll out to class of 2036. That's who's in our 1st grade right now. And if we looked at the 4 grade levels that would be in the high school in 8 years, you can see how much lower that total is compared to where we've been at 1,340 and 1,300 plus students at CHS. So these 1st grade cohorts, like I say, changed. So there were 969 students in that group originally, but now there are 1,002. They'll continue to change, but we know that we'll have a fair amount of space given how much of a decline we've seen off of the highs around 1,300 there at the peak. So that's kind of the grand overview of numbers of enrollment. I also included this in the back to school letter. It's obvious when you walk around our schools that we're becoming a more diverse district. We've been becoming a more diverse district, but you see that play out in the schools when you're inside them. We also see, and I mentioned something about languages and home languages. This chart just shows the total number of students that are multilingual students or English language learning students, and the way the state kind of tracks students who receive these services is that each bar includes students who are currently receiving programming in ESL or students who have received programming in ESL and then exited. So you can see just the cumulative effect of more and more students every year in the district who need instruction in English as a second language. So some of the conclusions are that the enrollment has come down quite a bit off the highs, 4,300 district-wide, 1,340 at the high school. So we're quite a bit off of the highs, but we've stopped declining at the moment. And we know that there's still some housing development that is set to come online. So we do expect that the decline is probably not going to return, at least not in the near future. Student body has become more diverse. Pre-K-5 has stabilized first and will begin to rebound as we move forward, most likely. The fact that we're moving third grade out of the 3 elementary schools is going to help us preserve a full-day kindergarten program. If we hadn't done that, or if we weren't going to do that, it would be probably impossible to keep full-day kindergarten running because we wouldn't have the space as the enrollment starts to tick back upward. And it also helps us stave off the redistricting of neighborhood boundaries because the less space that you have in the schools, the greater need you have to reallocate according to the space that you do have. We can tell by our first grade cohorts that CMS will continue to have space available at least until our current first graders make their way into the building. And our current kindergarten is fairly modest too in size. So we have a pretty good window into the next 6 to 10 years based on the current first graders. And the same holds true for the high school. The high school, we can tell, will be in a good position for a longer period of time because we know who the first graders are, roughly, the cohorts are, as of today. So that's it. I'm happy for the board members to come back up, and I'll answer any questions I can.
Anybody have any specific questions for Dr. LaSousa right off the bat? Ms. Weber?
Yeah, not surprising. I didn't have a question for Dr. LaSousa. I just wanted to mention that the last board meeting, I reported out, based on the borough's information, that the IV, for example, is 80% occupied. And that was as of like a month ago. I forget, the Enclave is, fully occupied. Right across the street is pretty much done. The skate park, Arbor Green, I think is fully occupied. So, Dr. LaSousa said we may have bottomed out. I think that's pretty accurate. Given that we don't know what's happening to River Road and the Charlie Brown's hasn't come online yet, that might be the only unknown. And I think there's 53 units there. So I don't know that we're going to get a groundswell of people, unless I'm thinking of selling my house to the Von Trapps. But, 3 or 5 years ago, when we had this conversation, the Ivy wasn't completed, the Christmas Charm wasn't completed, the skate park wasn't completed. I apologize for not using the right names. So I think we're getting to a point where we have a lot more insight now than we did 5 years ago. So, you know, I don't think there's going to be a groundswell based on the housing that's already built.
Based on the number of students that we've gotten. from
That's
the
correct,
housing and
based on the
services.
students that we've gotten from those developments already.
Right, correct. Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead, Mike.
Dr. LaSusa, do we know, I think we know the answer to this, but how many students does Harding send to Madison today?
I think the number today is between 25 and 30.
So it's not 100, like people are saying, right?
It's 100 for 4 grades.
25 to 30 per grade.
25 to 30 per grade?
Yes, but the current Harding enrollment it ranges from, let's say, 25 to 40 students, but historically, some percentage of those students don't wind up going to public school. They end up going to private high schools.
Okay.
Dr. LaSusa, also regarding Harding, do you know, has the demographer looked at their population as well?
Not for, our demographer has not done that for us. I don't know what kind of demographic projections they've worked with.
They had a demographer, didn't they? Yeah. I don't know. Got it. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. That was very thorough. Appreciate the presentation. Helpful. Hopefully that's helpful to people. Okay, moving on to, is that it for you?
That's it from me.
Okay. Moving on to Business Administrator's Report. Mr.
Sure,
DeCola.
just have two items. As you can see behind you, there is start of construction. So the November board meeting that's scheduled for Monday, November 4th, we will need to have the meeting in the middle school auditorium, starting again at 7:30, and I presume we'll be back here for December. Just a very brief construction update. The roofer has completed all of the work. The architect will be on site on Thursday to do the review and punch list, create the punch list if anything needs to be tidied up. And the current plan for the vestibules is still intact, that the contractor should have the interior security doors installed by the end of October.
Perfect. Okay, good. Anybody have any questions for Mr. DeQuilla? Okay, moving on to Student Liaison Report. Ahana?
So yeah, at the high school, we've been getting back into the swing of things. We had a great activity fair last Thursday. So a couple of important dates. Back to school night is this Thursday at the high school. And then next week, Cougar Weekend starts. So all of our home athlete games. So that starts Wednesday and then goes into Saturday with the senior tailgate before the football game. And then homecoming is also coming up, so that's going to be October 5th. And then two kind of like student feedback things. So one like minor inconvenience for students lately has been a few of the bathrooms have been closed to students in a couple of hallways. So students don't always have access to the closest bathrooms to their class, just a minor thing. And then on the opposite end of things, athletes and students have both been really happy with the new paint in the AV gym, saying that it feels much brighter from before, so a little improvement. That's all.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. DeQuilla, do we know why the bathrooms are closed?
Yes. First off, agreed on the gymnasium. It looks amazing. The bathrooms are closed because of issues that we have with vape pens being flushed down the toilets and then backups and having to call the plumber and all of that. So The high school administration is trying to be strategic about which restrooms remain open and how they can be supervised appropriately, but that is the primary reason for any closures that we have.
So there's your report back. Tell them not to vape in the bathroom. Right. No vaping, no flushing. Okay, moving on. Okay, thank you so much, Ahana, and happy senior year. Okay, moving on to the committee reports. Personnel, Ms. Weber.
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much. We met on September 11th. We covered, obviously, the new year and staffing items that came up. That's an ever-evolving quest. There, we talked about the new training for the new substitute app. They switched from Frontline over to a different company called Red Rover, and I think that's being positively received at the administrative level. We talked about the new supervisor that's coming on board at I think the end of October, and that was also discussed in curriculum, so I'll cover that then. And we also talked about the paras. We're in pretty good shape staffing, but if there's any paras out there that want to still apply, and substitutes, if you know of anybody, friends, countries, Romans, if you could, just keep the word out. We could still use some more paras, and we could always use more substitutes. So that was it for personnel. Any questions?
Okay. Any questions on personnel? No? Okay. Moving on to curriculum, Ms. Weber.
Me again. I'm covering for Susan Ross, who was in attendance at the meeting, but asked me to just cover the report out. So we talked about the August professional development days and that there were several presentations for teachers over the 2 days before school started. They covered trauma-informed practices, instruction for multi-language learners, and the power of play for kindergartens. On another topic, we talked about the K-5 rollout, how the K-5 progress reports, the revisions with English language arts and the math supervisors are sharing the final versions with the teachers to get feedback. The English language supervisors should, as I mentioned, should start at the end of October. Heather Rocco resigned and went to another district, got a promotion, so this is to replace that staff member. We talked about the reconfiguration and mapping out what the dates for the spring of 2025 for the new buildings, and Cheryl Russo is working on it. Cheryl Russo mentioned that the integration of the third grades, if you recall, we moved three sections of third graders over to Lafayette, and that's off to a great start. Just two more items, if you bear with me. We talked about field trips. Currently, the overnight field trips, the Disney trips that the band members take every 4 years, and we also discussed the 8th grade field trip and how successful we can be in continuing to offer those given a myriad of factors. The parents at the middle school have received a survey to gauge interest in running a DC trip, albeit at a fairly increased cost, versus several local, trips that would be significantly less expensive. And the final item is the individualized learning program at the high school. This has to do with the waivers that we allow for students that are involved in sports to waive off of their gym requirement. And there's always been, if you're in a Chatham sport, it's much easier to keep track of how much physical education you're doing. These are for sports that are not affiliated with the school, maybe a gymnastics team, an outside wrestling team, a swimming team. So I believe that there'll be more discussion on that, probably and more in policy coming up to see, how we can tighten that up and make sure we're not breaking any laws, because the state requires so many hours for physical education. It's very difficult to monitor outside affiliates. Our next meeting will be October 9th.
Okay, perfect. Any questions for Ms. Weber on curriculum? Okay. Finance and facilities. Who's moving finance in Bradley's absence? Have they met?
We met. Finance did not meet.
You have not
We
met?
haven't met.
Okay.
We meet again on
Perfect.
October 25th, I think.
Policy and planning, have you met?
September 25th.
Same thing,
Okay.
policy planning meets the same day as finance.
Okay, cool. Awesome, thank you. Anybody have any liaison reports?
Oh, yeah, CEF, Chatham
Yeah.
Education Foundation. The CEF is thrilled to announce the start of another fantastic year, 25 dedicated trustees and 29 passionate volunteers. They're always looking for more volunteers, so get involved if you're able to. Also, thanks to the generosity of donors and the creativity of our teachers and administrators, they're excited to kick off another year of grant funding. And they're also pleased to share that we've already approved grants to support the new horticulture class at CHS. And also stay tuned for Trivia Night, which is a hot ticket. That'll happen on November 16th, so keep your eyes out and sign up for that early, because that does book up. They do keep a waiting list, but go as early as you can. There you go.
Anybody else? Liaison reports? Yes, perfect. Okay, great. Okay, moving on to the minutes from the previous meeting.
For the 8:26 public and executive, Ms. Kenny and Ms. Ciccarelli need to abstain. For the 8:28 special meeting, Dr. Zhang and Ms. Ciccarelli need to abstain.
Go ahead.
Need a motion?
I'd like to motion to move the minutes from the August 26th meeting and the special meeting on the 28th.
The 8:26 meeting, Ms. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro,
Yes.
Ms. Kenny,
Abstain.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Dr. Zhang,
Yes.
and Ms. Ciccarelli.
Abstain.
It passed 5-0-2. The 8:28 meeting, Ms. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro,
Yes.
Ms. Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Dr. Zhang,
Abstain.
and Ms. Ciccarelli abstain. 1, 2, 3. Those passed 5-0-2.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, this is our first opportunity for public commentary. Hearing of citizens during the public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are or are not topics scheduled for the current meeting. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers will be asked to limit their comments to a reasonable length of time. And when you do go over, if you could just sign in and state your name and where you are from, that would be great.
My name is James Hitchings. I'm one of the vice presidents of the Chatham Education Association, and I also teach design technology at the middle school. As in the past, CEA members will be coming to the board meetings throughout the year to highlight some of the great things that are happening in Chatham schools and the benefits to the students that come from the hard work of our membership. This year and this evening, I'd like to start with a massive thank you to our custodial and maintenance staff for all of the hard work that they've done over the summer to prepare our buildings to open. There's been a lot of painting, a lot of construction, and a lot of things happening, and the custodial staff then had to go through and clean everything after that, so they've done a fantastic job. CMS looks incredible, the painted lockers, the new painted hallways. While we were there in the first couple of staff PD days, the custodial staff was going around and cleaning out all of the lockers, making sure they were all ready for the students to come in. So it's a huge amount of work that they've done, and they deserve a big round of applause. On top of their regular summer cleaning, the painting, repairing, the waxing, many teachers were moving buildings this year. We're looking to even more people moving next year, so the custodial maintenance staff really make that happen, and we are very thankful to them. This year, many of our staff will be preparing for the upcoming restructuring of the district. We would like to express our appreciation for the union members who have served on committees and who have provided feedback and provided ideas, and to the administration for allowing us to have our voices heard during that process. We hope that as we move forward, the administration will remain receptive to hearing our feedback and ideas to make the restructuring as successful as possible. And then on a personal note at the end, I'd just like to highlight the experience that I was lucky to have this summer, along with 3 members of the CEA. So it was myself, Jess Leitis from CMS, Lisa Kressler, and Kathy Gomber from Washington Avenue attended the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education Summer Seminar, which was led by Maud Dami. It's really, there's no words to describe how amazing this experience was. We traveled through multiple different countries in Europe, Berlin, Prague, Krakow, Lublin, Warsaw, Amsterdam. We stood witness to Maud's story and to the stories of millions of people who were murdered during the Holocaust. While we were at one of the concentration camps, Theresienstadt, Maud bought a book that she signed for the Chatham Middle School Library, which will be put into the library there. And just the bonding to be able to meet with people from different buildings, we don't often get those chances, so it's a great opportunity for like Jess and I to meet with Lisa and Kathy and to experience that and to witness. It was truly a life-changing experience and one that will surely benefit the students of Chatham. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria Alden. Discussing the Harding exploration. Question 1 for you is, will Chatham residents have a vote or a say in any of this? If so, when? And number 2, what is the benefit of taking on additional students and going back to peak levels if that might happen?
Hello, Beth McNaughton. I currently have a freshman and junior in Chatham High School. It is a fantastic school, but I am also concerned with taking on the Harding students. I'm sure they're lovely people. I know some of them. It's not about that. But a potential 10 to 15% increase in a student population is concerning. I don't know how many of you on the board have kids in the current school district, especially in high school. It's fantastic, but there are limited opportunities. There's volunteer hours that go within minutes, if not hours. There's wait lists sometimes for AP classes. There were cuts this year on the swim and track team, which there hasn't been in the past. Teachers have only a limited amount of hours. I know my son was in an honors ELA class, and he could not meet with the teacher sometimes. The teacher only has a certain amount of hours. So with the additional students, and these are arguably, from a community with a lot of means, there's also a lot of competition to get into colleges. It's fantastic to go to Chatham, but it definitely makes it more challenging to get into some of these competitive colleges. I, implore the board to really not vote on this or do not accept taking on new students until we have a full idea of what the impact will be with the 250 units from the Ivy, the 18 units on Main Street, the new post office housing, the potential of another large building, 2 apartment buildings on River Road. It doesn't matter what the trends are. I don't know if our forecast really can take into account what this will be, because we don't know who the families are moving into these different buildings. It could potentially be, 600 to 700, new students. And then finally, we are the taxpayers. Our taxes pay for the school budget, which is fantastic. Again, we have a great school district. And, but, Harding, they do pay less taxes than us. Like I went on today to compare. I live in a 4-bedroom house on a quarter of an acre. And for instance, I would pay the same taxes somebody living in Harding that has a 6-bedroom house on a 7,000 square foot property. So I just do not think it's right. It's the taxpayers who are basically taking on the burden of the new students. It's my understanding that they will be paying some money, but I don't think that makes up for the increase in students and the potential impact on opportunities for the taxpayers of this community and our kids. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kara Firth. I have 2 kids at Washington currently, and one that will be joining next year. Just a whole host of questions ranging all over the map. But first, I understand what bringing the children from Harding into the high school would mean for them. I guess I'm just looking if you could give a couple examples of positive things that would work for our students to bring them in. Like, what benefit does Chatham have to bringing those kids in? How much money is the school district getting for that? And would it be earmarked towards any one area? Well, speaking of paying, are you still planning to charge for kindergarten for next year? I know originally the plan was for it to be free and full day to everyone for the 2025-2026 school year. So if you could speak to that, that would be appreciated. Also, will the residents of Chatham be able to vote on the Harding matter? I do know there's a rec meeting tomorrow, but that's obviously separate from what you all do here. And then one other thing, if you could speak to start times. I know there was some discussion on moving the middle school back a little bit and having the elementary school start a little bit earlier, and that especially with the full shift happening next year with 5th grade completely being in the middle school. If you could just speak to that a little bit as well. And that's it. And thank you for volunteering your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alex Briel. I'm the Milton Avenue liaison between you guys and the PTO there. Most of the ladies have touched on some of the points, so I'll just highlight a couple of the concerns that I'd like to bring both from myself and from the Milton parents. The Harding issue has been discussed. More specifically, as mentioned, what do residents get and what do our children and high schoolers get in terms of the benefit of bringing in the Harding cohort? How will this impact our K through 8 rec programs, and what does that look like then for our sports programs for the high school? I'd also echo the sentiment that residents and parents would love to better understand when we get to vote or when we get a say on this said proposal. Secondarily, the kindergarten tuition-based program, as Kara had previously mentioned, as a resident of multiple children in the elementary and preschool programs, I know the $5,000 full-day kindergarten program came at the expense of our free half-day program, which means that if you have a child that is kinder-ready, there's not a free public education available to them here in Chatham as a tax-paying resident. And although I understand the legality of that as well as the complexity of that in terms of our space, et cetera, I certainly feel that it's not quite in line with the mission and vision for our town here in Chatham not to have a free public offering for some of our youngest students. I would even argue that that's not even right, and we should have planned for that in a way. So I'd like to better understand how kindergarten residents that pay taxes like every other resident here in town, who also have some of the highest child care costs of any demographic in our town, are then also asked to pay an additional $5,000 per child or $10,000 for twin parents like myself without any sibling discount that the private educations offer in order for our children to receive a public education. So I'd reiterate that previous comments that I've made at board meetings here, that kindergarten parents are not really meant to be a means to subsidize the board's budget, and I'd love transparency on a roadmap for the kindergarten students in the future. So I'm hoping there's clarity and support from the board there to ensure that every child in Chatham can receive the free education, especially as we're considering bringing in another town to also take some education from our children. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the first public comment section for the time being. Dr. LaSusa, do you want to speak to any, all? I'll give you your choice of what you want to speak to, but.
I see Ms. Weber chomping. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to?
Start.
Okay, I'll start then. First and foremost, I want to thank James and the 3 teachers who took advantage of the opportunity last year to go on the Holocaust trip. That's an 88-year-old woman who's leading that trip through however many countries, however many Holocaust sites. It's a very, very emotional and difficult trip to make, even though it's wonderful. But I think I sent the email from Maud in December or so of last year, inviting Chatham educators in particular, because she had been here with us on this stage in August. And 4 of our teachers, Kathy and Lisa and James and Jess, went. And I just want to thank them for doing that, because it's important work and they deserve kudos for it. In terms of Harding, I'll kind of bounce around. 90% of our budget comes from the local tax levy. And the local tax levy is permitted to increase by 2% a year. That's about $1.5 million or so when you get to the bottom of it. Our salary increases are north of 3%. Our health insurance and health benefits costs are higher than that, or have been at least in the last 5 or 6 years. So what the Harding relationship would offer us and the taxpayers in Chatham is another source of revenue that, at least if the terms were similar to what Harding is paying to Madison, would be roughly the equivalent of our entire tax levy increase on a year-to-year basis. So if there are concerns about opportunities at the high school, whether that's related to class sizes or number of extracurricular offerings, that's directly tied to revenue. If we want to ensure that class sizes remain low relative to other high schools, which they are right now, we need more revenue. And the tax levy isn't producing enough revenue given what our expenses are like at the current time. We booked, I believe, $800,000 in kindergarten tuition for this current year budget. So you can do the math. $800,000 is roughly half of the tax levy increase. So if we were going to try to move to free full-day kindergarten, which we all want to do, we have to eliminate $800,000 of expenses. The primary place we would do that is in staffing at the upper grades. So class sizes would go up if we were going to try to save $800,000 in order to bring on or eliminate, I should say, the tuition for kindergarten, which is why we didn't go down to 0 to kindergarten this current year, but we went as far as we could to try to reduce the expense on families. But any further than that would have led to more cutting at other grade levels. So what the potential relationship with Harding offers, and I should point out that roughly half of the districts in New Jersey right now are either K-6 or K-8 districts that then are part of a regional high school district or have a send-receive relationship with another district. Harding has been sending its students to Madison. Before that, it sent its students to Morristown. The mechanism for determining a send-receive relationship is a board vote. It's not a public vote. It does not require a referendum or a majority of the public. It's rather a Board of Ed vote, so that's the mechanics of it. But obviously, the primary benefit to the Board of Education, the school district in Chatham, would be an additional revenue source that has never existed to this point. In terms of space, we're nowhere near, I just showed that we were at 1,300 students for several years, and we're heading down to 1,000. And the new housing developments are not going to make up a difference of 340 students, which is what our current enrollment shows is going to happen. Even if we assume that we're going to take on an increased number of students from either housing turnover because the interest rates come down and everyone wants to sell, or because there's new development, there isn't any chance that we're getting back up toward 1,300 in the next 10 to 12 years. So the fact that Harding would wind up likely sending us 120 students, let's say, is just a differential we can manage fairly easily, because we will have had 300 more students than we will by the time the enrollment goes down to 1,000 or so. Start times, that's still something that we're discussing. We needed to get this school year up and running first. Transportation is most hectic and challenging in August and then in September as we're sorting out the routes and the drivers are learning all of the stops. and we're trying to take on students to pay subscription fees, which is on a case-by-case sort of wait list basis. Now that that is beginning to calm down, we are looking at whether or not First Student can accommodate a change in start times and what they can accommodate and what they can't. So our target internally is that by the middle of the year, January or so, we would make determinations if we were going to change any of the start and end times of the schools. But that's a little bit of a ways off as a result of the transportation issues that we always have at the beginning of the year. And I guess I'll stop there and turn it over to you all.
You jumping in?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know if
Yeah.
anybody else wanted to jump in.
No, go ahead.
Mike, do you want to go? Go ahead. Okay, Mike Dr. LaSousa covered most of it, but the overarching theme I'm hearing is, what's in it for us? What are the benefits to the Chatham taxpayers? And it's interesting you say that. The Chatham taxpayers benefit the most, not just K to 5, not 9 to 12, all of them. The kids, the folks that just moved in town that have infants that are going to be in our district, and folks like myself that just, the kids are out. You said, do you have any kids in the school? I just wanted to mention, my kids went through during that entire peak time. It was, you know, it was exactly, I don't know if you're here for the enrollment, but it was 200 more kids in each of the classes. But many residents come to the Board of Ed meeting and say, you're killing us in taxes. You have to find an alternative revenue source. That's not easy to do. We can't do a GoFundMe page, but this is one opportunity for significant revenue. Now imagine, if you will, because I know you've been around at least for a couple of years, imagine the last year's referendum, $850,000 for security. If we had this additional revenue, we wouldn't need to do that. Previous years when we needed to redo turf fields and tracks, to redo each turf field, just to resurface it, it's $500,000 each. That has to come from the taxpayers. If we had additional revenue, we wouldn't have to go out to the taxpayers and ask for that money. Same thing with HVACs and roofing. We can now budget that and not have to go out to the taxpayers for additional funds and revenue. So all of the taxpayers benefit the most. I wish Mr. Heap was here because he pretty much admonishes us each and every meeting to find additional revenue sources and stop increasing taxes. Mr. Smith is not here. Last year, we did not go to the full taxing authority to be sensitive to that. We're trying to come up with additional revenue sources. This is one way. Adding 25 kids, 30 kids in each grade in the high school with the excess capacity is not going to diminish the experience. I say it might increase it because you're dealing with kids new kids, not the same kids that you've been playing sports with for the last 8 years. So I think that's a benefit to always have additional kids to talk to, different experiences. So I just wanted to mention that the benefits are strictly to all the taxpayers. And if I can extrapolate, having done budgets for the last 14 years on the Board of Ed, if we don't get additional revenue, and again, it's still a proposal, let's say we don't get this additional revenue, what I can guarantee you is we will absolutely have to increase sizes at the high school. Because if our expenses exceed 10, 12%, and our revenue is from the tax base only 2%, well, there's a gap we need to make up. How do we make that up? Everybody that runs any kind of business or been to taken our financial literacy course, the only way to come up with that kind of revenue is headcount. So if we have to reduce headcount, which we've always said will start at the high school, you can have 25, 27, 28, 30 kids in the high school. You can't have 30 kids in a second grade class that are learning to read. So we would start reducing at the high school. So without additional revenue, I can guarantee you we will increase class sizes. With additional revenue, we can absolutely keep it level, down, flat. So again, the benefit is to 100% of the taxpayers, and the benefit is to ensure that we can continue to keep class sizes small. Without additional revenue, we will have to increase class sizes.
Okay. Anybody else? And just to the rec question, you'd have to come to the rec meeting tomorrow to get the answer to that. We will be there.
And sorry, again, just a point of reference. The rec is an advisory committee. Really, the decision is the municipalities. So the borough, the school district is one district, 2 municipalities. The borough council has to agree to it, and the township committee has to agree to it. So we could say, yeah, do it, and if that becomes a deal breaker for a sending district, well, then that's revenue that we don't even have an opportunity to get because the two municipalities, for whatever reason, decided it was not in our best interest. So while the school board can enter into a send receive, just on that very narrow subject of recreation for the K to 8 kids, that really has to be decided by the municipalities.
Plus the fact that that only happens if they decide,
Oh, yeah.
if we give them the okay that they could play rec sports, and if they even decide to come here to begin with, bring the high school kids over, then those kids could then play rec sports if
Right.
it was all approved. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. They're not playing rec sports here. It only depends on if the high school kids come here.
Right. And
It's not that big an issue.
they just want to play with their friends. They want to play with the same kids that they're going to go to high school with later on. And in the rec, Chris, you and I have talked about it, even if it's 25 kids in first grade, second grade, third grade, in Harding that want to play rec, let's say 80% of them want to play sports. Okay, now we're down to 20. Now we're splitting that by gender, that's 10 and 10. You're
Amongst
talking about
different sports.
Yeah, and how many programs? Like 27 programs?
I don't know, the whole big pile.
So you're talking one or two, maybe, two or three kids in each program.
Maybe more. I mean, maybe there's 20, but I think they can swallow all of that.
Right. And they bring in revenue, right?
And they bring in revenue.
What's interesting is the rec folks, their enrollment is decreasing, but their expenses are increasing. They're in the same boat that we are. So they're going to have to charge residents more to pay for the coaches.
They already got it.
For sure.
Right, for sure.
They got
So
stuff going on. Yep.
Their enrollment is directly tied to our enrollment.
Without a doubt.
So they should be looking for additional sources of revenue as well. But more tomorrow, to Ann's point.
Right. Yeah, we'll see what they say. Anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to the regular action items for personnel. Ms. Weber?
Yes, great. Thank you, Ann. So I would like to move action items 1 through 18 on the regular agenda. And there's no 19. Peter, if you could just take a note of that. There's no 19, but there's an addition of 20. So you can either keep it as 20 or rename it as 19, dealer's choice.
It will be 19.
Okay, so it's now 19, and there's an addendum or addition on items number 1, 3, and 4. They're just changes, additional names, a salary correction, and another name on number 3. So there's some corrections, an addition of 20, now soon to be, from here on forth, to be called 19. Great, so 1 to 18, 20, 19, and the 1, 3, 4.
I'll second it.
Dan seconded it.
I know, I was waiting to see if there's any questions. Agenda items 1 to 18, addendums, items 1, 3, 4, and 19. Ms. Allen?
Approve.
Mr. Del Sandro?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Dr. Zhang?
Yes.
And Ms. Chickarelli?
Yes,
Agenda items passed 7-0.
perfect, thank you so much. Moving on to finance and facilities.
Actually, I have a question, Peter. I think one of the numbers is not right. The total should have been 2 million or 5 million?
Hold on. On which one?
Item 1.
Yes. Thank you. I will correct the addition when I publish the minutes.
Good catch there. I don't know the answer to that. Who's moving finance?
Oh, I can do it.
Okay,
I would like to move item B with the correction of 2,005,2.59. Item B1 to B18.
Second.
I'm sorry. I second it.
Agenda items B1 as corrected and 2 through 18. Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Dr. Zhang,
Yes.
and Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Agenda items pass 7-0.
Okay, perfect. Curriculum?
Oh, one moment for Susan.
Okay.
I would like to move item C1 through C5 on the agenda. Second.
Mr. Ryan seconded it.
I got it. Agenda items C1 to 5. Ms. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro,
Yep.
Ms. Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Dr. Zhang,
Yes.
and Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes,
Agenda items pass 7-0.
perfect. And policy.
Yeah, I'd like to move agenda items D1, D2.
I second it.
Agenda items D1 and D2.
Oh, sorry, Peter, just a quick question. Mr. Ryan or Dr. LaSousa, we're doing a second reading on policy 6146, the graduation requirement. Is that related to the FAFSA form, or is it additional tweaks?
No, that's the form that they,
FAFSA.
FAFSA, okay, great, thanks.
Agenda items D1 and D2. Ms. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro,
Yes.
Ms. Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Dr. Zhang,
Yes.
and Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes,
Agenda items pass 7-0.
perfect. Thank you so much. Anybody have any additional board business they want to discuss? You good? Okey-doke. We will have our second opportunity for public commentary. Same rules apply, and if you will, please just sign in and introduce yourself. That'd be great. Thank you. Glasses switch.
Hi, Maria Alden again, and I forgot to say before, I'm a mom of a senior, a freshman, and a sixth grader, and I'm also one of the PTO presidents at the high school this year. So to be clear, this isn't about revenue or physical space. As parents, it's about the opportunities at the high school. Also, many would like to know, what is the cost to Harding parents to come to Chatham High School? Third, we know how many Harding kids attend Madison High School right now, but is that how many will attend if given the opportunity to come to Chatham? So I guess what we'd like to know is how many high school age students Harding has.
Hello, Kara Firth again. And I also am here asking questions on behalf of Washington parents as well. Two things. I don't think we actually spoke to how much money per child Harding would be paying. And also, do we have an estimate of how much it costs per child? I think it's like $18,500 a kid per year. If you can speak to those numbers a little bit. And then if Harding does come in, are you saying that kindergarten would definitely be free? Because that's another question for elementary school parents. So if we can get answers on both of those, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Sorry, a little shorter here. Hi, Megan Rourke. I have a current sophomore and a eighth grader in Chatham. And just listening to all different things, I have a few different topics. You mentioned about how Harding, this is going to benefit the taxpayers, and you're not going to come back and ask us to do different things. But the difference is, when you do come to the taxpayer for the different projects, we have an option to vote. We're voting, yes, we want to do this, we're going to give you the money or not. With this Harding, we do not have an option to vote. It's all up to the board. So that's one thing that I think is a little difficult for us to swallow. Also, you projected the numbers of Harding. You mentioned about 20 or 30 children per year. But is the contract, does this contract going to have a limit, saying what happens if Harding turns around and wants to send 50 or 70 a year? And how long are we locked into this contract? So currently, how many Harding students are going to Madison? And let's say it's 25, and, you know, you have another 30 going to private school. Well, all of a sudden, they said, oh, we are now going to Chatham. Okay, those 30 kids say, you know what, I don't have to send my kids to private school anymore. I like Chatham better. So is that number going to increase? So we don't know exactly how many. And if they do go to 50 or 70 a year, can we say, we don't want to do this anymore, and how quickly can we end this contract if you decide to do it? So that's one thing. You know, as you can tell, I'm not a big proponent of this, but I don't think we have enough information either. We have a lot of information. But on a different side note, as I mentioned, I am a parent of an 8th grade student, and they've been looking forward to the DC trip. The 8th grade has they did one field trip last year, and their last field trip before that was Turtleback Zoo in kindergarten. So they've been looking forward to this trip. We did get the survey out. We haven't heard the results. I hear that you're discussing, I guess, on October 9th. But this is one thing that the parents really do want. Some are concerned about the cost and the different choices they made about providing lunch where the parents used to pay for it. So I'm not sure of the breakdown of all the numbers, but the DC trip, the parents really want it, the kids really want it, and this is a rite of passage for them, so I please hope that they do not eliminate it either. Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to add one more point to the Harding conversation. Sorry, Alex Friel.
Thank you.
Chatham, back up. So I wanted to add a point on the Harding conversation. As previously noted, there was questions about the length of the contract. So how many years are we talking about, including or giving the option for Harding to come into the Chatham High School? Based on that, it would also be helpful to understand what are the incoming demographics. So it's 25 to 40 per grade. This coming, 2025, 2026, or whatever the year is. Does that number then increase over the years? Are we looking at 40 to 50 or 50 to 60, and what are the dollars along with that? As you talked about our budget increasing at roughly 2% or only allowed to increase 2%, what does it look like in terms of tuition for them versus the first year, second year, third year as our costs go up? So that's the point on the Harding piece. The second piece is I think there's still a lot of misconception and lack of clarity on the kindergarten piece. I don't think it's been addressed. What does that roadmap look like? Will it continue to be paid? If so, for how long? By how much? All of those pieces of information would be important, not just for parents to understand that have incoming kindergartners, but also in planning for people that have preschoolers that are looking to come in. They need to start planning now if it's going to be 5 or 7 or 6 or 3 in the coming years. Thank you.
Hello, Beth McNaughton again, and thank you all for your time, first of all. I understand that it's a board vote, but as elected public officials, it would be wonderful if you could engage with the community and allow the community to have a formal say, because I don't think everybody's fully aware, has all the information, and that would be fantastic. So that's my request to you. And then the other thing is timing. If you were to move forward this, what would be the timing? Would it be after all the apartment buildings are built and you have a full sense of the incoming student population? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Amy Wagner. I live in Chatham. I have a 9th grader and 11th grader. Last year, the high school swim team, as mentioned earlier, had cuts. There were a substantial number of girls, not so many boys. So on the girls' team, there had to be a lot of cuts. I understand this fall, there's already been cuts on some of the sports teams. I don't recall if you all addressed that in your response to the earlier comments about that. But that is definitely a concern. When you increase the population, that's going to be more difficult for our students in Chatham to be able to participate. I also have heard comments earlier about the teachers' availability to meet with students before school or during lunch or after school, and that's already been a problem this year, and school year's just started. So how is that going to be impacted by an increase in number of students? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the second opportunity for public comment. Anybody want to react, answer anything, Dr. LaSousa?
I can do my best again.
Yeah.
Well, first off, nothing has been committed to at this point, right? Harding may decide that they want to continue their relationship with Madison and not have anything to do with Chatham. So the first next step is that Harding has to determine whether it wants to change where it sends its students to high school. And again, that's the board's authority in Harding to make that determination. So I can't speak to specifics about contract, the exact terms that ultimately would be agreed to. I can say that right now, and what Harding has been doing is sending its students to Madison at a cost of about $15,000 per pupil. So it's a per pupil, not one lump sum, but a per pupil on a per pupil basis. I just pulled up the enrollment reports I referenced in my brief presentation. Harding, as of last year's October 15th enrollment, had 298 students total, grades K through 8, 298. So the entire district of Harding is about the same size as Milton Avenue School, almost exactly, distributed across 9 grade levels. That works out to about 33 per grade. So I can't hypothesize about how many students would come every year and how many will choose to go to private school versus go to either Madison High School or Chatham High School or another high school. But we know the number of students essentially that attend the Harding schools, and that number has remained constant for a long time. They've had about 300 students enrolled in their entire district for as long as I can remember. So we have a feel for that. What we're talking about with the revenue is that we can hire additional teachers if we need to, because obviously they're paying for something, and they're paying for our ability to meet the needs of all of the students that would be in our charge, whether they come from Chatham Township, Chatham Borough, or Harding Township. In terms of teachers not being able to meet with students, that's the first I'm hearing about that, but that has nothing to do with the number of teachers per student currently in the high school, because it's about the same. It's actually, we have a better student to teacher ratio now than we did when I was teaching in Chatham High School 23 years ago. In terms of kindergarten roadmap, the bottom line with kindergarten is we have to either make commensurate cuts in the budget when we get to the budget season, and we're figuring out, we're finding out what our state is, we're finding state aid is, we're finding out what the appetite is to increase the tax levy from the Board of Education. We can't have a clear window or roadmap with kindergarten because we don't have the revenue, we don't have the luxury of having all of the revenue we want. If we did, kindergarten would be free already, of course. So it is not a definite that kindergarten would be free next year, even if this comes to fruition. The likely start date for this would be the 26-27 school year, because Harding's current contract with Madison expires June 30th of 26. So it's the year after next school year that this would be something that we're looking at. We've had cuts on athletic teams as long as I can remember. When I was high school principal, we had cuts on our athletic teams. We have cuts depending on the number of participants that come out for a team. We've expanded the number of teams and athletic offerings that we have at the high school over the years pretty consistently. We'll continue to try to meet the demands and the needs for all of the students, but we always evaluate whether it's safe to have the level of participation that we had. With track and swimming, there were concerns about supervision and how well we could monitor and give access to the facilities. We only have one track, for example, and if we have 140 students running spring track, They can't all be on the track at the same time. Otherwise, you have concerns over safety, so that's a separate issue. So that's it in a nutshell for me, I guess. I'll hand it off to you.
Okay. Jill, do you want to add anything to the
I just didn't, Mike, did you-
Harding conversation?
I know you said you couldn't mention contract specifics, but I don't know if you mentioned, there's obviously limits, whether it's a 4-year, 5-year, and that's in place where the sending district can pull out, or the receiving district. You know, any sending district might say, you know what, we're done with you, we're going to New Providence for the next 10 years. So the contract would have a limit, likely 4 or 5 years. It wouldn't be indefinite. So, you know, if 150 years from now, Harding has 50 8th graders, you know, you could end the contract. You can renegotiate every 5 years. And any contract would increase a percentage each year, just like our tax base increases a percentage each year.
375 kids per class. And now we're down to about, we're under 300 now, correct?
There's a mix at the high school right now.
By the time we get to
Chris, we can't
240.
hear you, sorry.
I'm
Can you
sorry.
speak into your mic instead of turning towards him? We can't hear you, and we're right here.
No one usually has a problem hearing me. The question is, where will those teachers go when we're down to 240 kids per class? If we do not take an outside source like somebody like Harding, if they even want to come?
Well, what we've done over time is we've adjusted our staffing levels according to the students that we have. So some years in some grade levels, we've increased staff. Other years, we've reduced staff. And then, of course, we have programmatic types of decisions like special ed programming that can drive staffing apart from enrollment. But yes, as the class sizes shrink, we need fewer teachers. Cohort sizes.
Which a lot of
Cohort
times you get
sizes.
through attrition. It's not that you
Right,
lay off teachers.
retirement, but, yeah, sure.
It's usually
Some of
attrition.
that's
People,
natural.
fortunate people retiring.
Some of that would be natural,
Great,
Right.
not forced.
exactly.
If we're 100 less kids, per grade, there's going to be something going on eventually, someday.
But we always adjust.
Yeah.
Right? That's what keeps Beth in business.
That's right.
And just a note on the kindergarten. I've been on the board for 14 years. We've been trying to get kindergarten just in the district, full-day kindergarten in the district for the last 14 years. We've made great strides. We're not there. We're not there, but we've got to figure out where to come, you know, up with the money. We've reduced it each year, and the goal is to obviously get to free. Nobody on this board wants it to be free. Residents want it to be free. There's other residents that say, you know, hey, pay to play. Totally get free education, public education, part of the social contract. Nobody here at this table would disagree with that. It's just a matter of how do we get there. And we've not just blindly doing nothing. We've been reducing it each year. We've been increasing the number. This is the first year in 125 years of the district that we've been able to have full-day kindergarten for every single student. So that's not nothing, but it's not perfect yet. So we're going to keep moving toward, as best we can, toward perfect. Can you turn on Ying News? Or not?
Can you hear me? Okay, here we go. Do you agree there's another way to look at it is because the enrollment has been declining, so keeping the same number of teachers and everything the same, we do have extra capacity to take in the number of Harding students, let's say 25 per grade. Our existing capacity is enough to take that.
Our existing physical capacity is enough to take that. I don't know that our existing, we may need one additional staff member, let's say, in a given department, or one in 2 or 3 different departments. But that's what some of the tuition would go
fee.
to. Yeah.
That was my second question, is if the number of students were to increase, we will be able to use the money they pay to hire additional.
Yes.
Yes.
Forget Harding for a moment and looking at, I'd like to better understand the process you go through with, we're assuming that enrollment in the high school for the next 10 years will continue to decline based off of what you've said. So what do you put in place? Is it because you have to eliminate staff headcount. Eliminating classes doesn't get you to a budget number. Eliminating staff headcount gets you to a budget number. So how do you go through that process to make eliminations without eliminating selections of AP classes, without eliminating different levels of math and history and different electives? Can that happen or no?
Yes, of course, and that's what we've never culled individual classes or programs unless just the interest runs out. We just scaled back German beginning in middle school this year, right? The reason for that is we couldn't find teachers who were certified in German, and we have a smaller enrollment there than we've had, historically. But in terms of AP classes or the breadth of electives that we offer, there are two different, variables. The one is student interest. If we're running a horticulture course this year, it was well subscribed. If it hadn't been well subscribed and only 8 students showed up, we wouldn't have run it. But there is enough scale and economy in whatever department we're talking about that it's relatively easy to reduce staff based on, without interfering with the classes that you're offering. So like in other words, if one of these, the smallest cohorts that I showed up on the screen were about 250 kids, right, in our first grades and second grade, third grade, 250 kids, they all need to take freshman English, right? So you've got 250 kids spread across however many sections of freshman English you have. To eliminate, if there had been 300 kids in freshman English and now there are 250, that's 50 fewer students. That might take you down 2 or 3 sections right there. And when that happens in multiple grade levels, it's fairly easy to reduce 5 sections without changing any course offerings. 5 sections equals 1 teacher at the high school or middle school level. So it isn't, that isn't a significant challenge. The challenge is more when we get to 1,000 students and we're offering 5 languages at the high school, those languages are not going to be as well subscribed. And the language or 2, and whether it's German or it's American Sign Language or it's Chinese, which are the 3 least subscribed languages right now, at some point you could reach a moment where you can't continue to run all 5 of those languages because there's just not enough interest in them. But I'd say we're fairly far away from that at the high school level because kids like to take multiple electives, they like to take multiple languages. And because all of our staff pretty much is oriented around mathematics, science, social studies, ELA, we have the ability to reduce without having to alter course selection.
We do. Anybody else? All good? Okay.
We do have an executive session. Action will not be taken to discuss personnel and legal matters.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Get home safely.